Hello, this is Eric Johnson, The Brand.
And this is Aaron Thigpen, The Source. Today's topic, what are the three most important skills for middle school baseball players? As a performance trainer for 25 years now, I've seen a lot of baseball athletes, and I do a lot of work with baseball athletes. And I think I've got a good insight into what are the physical characteristics that make a dominant baseball player. But we're not just talking dominant. We're talking athletes have to start from somewhere. And it's important that the younger athlete and parent understand the process of development that needs to take place for them to be able to acquire the proper baseball skills. And that starts with a strong athletic foundation. And so, when I'm talking to parents, I tell them, don't worry about getting a bunch of fancy equipment or drills, but make sure you're strong in these three core areas: running, throwing, and catching. And I think that if you can do those three things solidly and you have the right foundation of mechanics and structure with those things, then your ability to attain baseball skills comes a lot easier. What are your thoughts?
I can't agree with you anymore, Aaron. I think in this day and age, and running, throwing, and catching are something that is in lost art. It seems like right now it's all about hitting. How much you can hit, how much power, launch angle, and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, say like that's all you have, just hitting. Well, in college or in high school, you have to play defense. And so they're going to look at you and say, well, he can't catch and throw. Where can he play? All these positions on the field now, 9 positions, are all athletic positions now. We have a bigger, stronger, faster athlete now. And acquiring these skills at a younger age are huge. So going in, seeing a sports performance person as yourself and getting the proper baseball person to teach these skills is critical.
And I agree. I think what I find is I get a lot of athletes that get to their junior and senior year and they don't have that athletic foundation, and they're in a situation where they're trying to do remedial work with these things, but it's very hard to get those up to a collegiate or an elite level, especially at that time and point. Some athletes are able to do it, some aren't. But I think that you pigeonhole yourself into a situation where, okay, if you've kind of made your bed in hitting, then you just can't be a good hitter. You have to be a plus hitter. And if you're not a plus hitter, then you bring nothing else to the table. And so athletes find themselves wanting because maybe their hitting isn't to the elite level that they need to be, and then have nothing else. There is no other tool. And you talk a lot about tools in baseball. Again, it's not just having one tool, but it's having a number of those tools.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, Aaron. I think one of the tools is running your speed, throwing, arm strength, and then catching is really defense. So you're talking about the 3 out of the 5 skills that need to be acquired. The other 2 skills are really one skill. That's hitting and hitting with power. So basically, these 3 out of the 5 tools, wow, that's great. Power is hard to come by. There's not a power. Guys don't have a power tool. How many great power hitters were there in the history of baseball? So it's a hitting tool. So let's just say it's 4 tools, and you have 3 of them. Well, I'm going to take you. I think any smart baseball person is going to take you. So I think acquiring these skills at a young age and training younger, I think all the athletes that you and I have shared over the years, and I think of these names like James Darnell and Chris Carter, I taught them how to run, throw, and catch. You taught them how to run and help them with all these elements that you and I put together to help them become a complete player. And we started that at a young age. So those guys came to us at 9 and 10 years old, and we were able to help them all the way through. They went from elite high school player to an outstanding collegiate player and a major league player. It's because of the foundation early.
Right. My expertise is running, of course, but people don't understand that running manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And it's not just about speed. You don't have to be the fastest kid. All you want is good usable speed. That usable speed will translate into better defense, better positioning, on base hits, maybe opportunity to steals, take extra bases. So I think that a lot of athletes don't understand. Running denotes a degree of your athleticism. And when coaches are evaluating an athlete, one of the easiest things that they can look at to determine if you're a good athlete, let alone baseball player, is how you run. Because the running denotes coordination, it denotes balance, it denotes a degree of power and explosiveness. So just by watching an athlete run, I, as a coach, can see those qualities in an athlete and tell whether or not they're below level, average, or an elite level, or potentially elite level athlete, regardless of their baseball skill. Because the skill, the baseball skills are always going to be taught and learned. But what gets left behind is your ability to run, throw, jump, catch. So I think the running is the foundation for athleticism.
I can't agree with you any more than that, because as I go out and I evaluate players, and blessed and lucky enough to be the national team coach for the 12U team this year in 2020, and that's a great honor. And one of the things, as I was helping evaluate the talent last year and hopefully moving forward this year, is the fact that how does an athlete move? How does a young player move? That's such a determining factor in my evaluation. Is this guy an elite player, or is this guy a good athlete to play at this next level? And I think that's critical. So looking at their movement pattern, looking how they carry themselves, their coordination, I think that's so important. It's just not, he throws hard, he runs fast, and he can catch. Well, what about the movement pattern? Can this guy handle tough hops because he's an athlete? Can he handle the slider because his body allows him to get into the position to handle that pitch? Mm-hmm. Can this pitcher repeat the motion because they're athletic enough? I think that's critical. And so having a younger athlete, between the age of 10 to 14, and that's really the athlete we're talking about, that middle school athlete, that's an important factor in their baseball skill development.
And with that, you see the physiological maturity changes during that time period. So you've got athletes who grow 2 shoe sizes in a year and bean pole up 6 inches, and some of them lean out, some of them gain weight, and they get disconnected and discombobulated. I always call it the baby giraffe syndrome. And a lot of that can be alleviated by getting out there, running, jumping, good movement patterns. And again, when I say throwing, I'm not just talking about pitching, but I'm just talking about gross athletic movements. Making sure that you keep those skills close, I think, will help a lot of these athletes transition through that kind of awkward period that most athletes go through.
And players are going to go through that awkward period a lot of times. And I think, that's when they need to be patient. Parents need to be patient, understand that. And the athlete himself needs to be patient, that it's just a matter of time and that development will happen. But I think getting that athlete into a sports performance training program allows them to better understand their body when they do eventually, get caught up with that baby giraffe syndrome you said, and they start to understand their body. And I think it's a better movement pattern for them.
Now, in regards to throwing, this is my take on it, because I have my off-season pitchers conditioning class, and I have my young guns, which are those younger athletes. I see a lot of athletes come in, and the parents come in, and they're all talking velo. And my programs are mainly focused on arm health and arm strength and endurance. And as a result of those things done properly, velo comes in through the back door. I just think at a young age, these athletes are so focused on throwing hard. And I'm not just talking about the pitchers. I'm talking about the position players also.
Yes.
That I'm seeing some throwing mechanics. I'm not even going to call them pitching mechanics, but I'm seeing throwing mechanics that are accidents waiting to happen, or already establishing ceilings with their development. So I think what happens in most cases, again, if I go back to when I was a kid, a long time ago, but you pretty much, if you didn't have anyone teach you from the onset, you pretty much picked up a ball and you went out there with your buddies and you threw the ball around. And how you figured out how to throw it was how you threw it. That may have changed nowadays, but I don't think so. I think kids are just, even if they start playing baseball from a young age, t-ball, no one's teaching them how to throw. They're picking up the ball and they're throwing it. They're not taught proper grip. They're not taught proper pronation. None of these things. And so I see these kids 10 years later and they're 15, 16, 17, and they've hit these plateaus in their throwing velocity, or they may have had these shoulder and elbow issues because their mechanics are just the gross throwing mechanics are poor. There's a disconnect between the lower and upper body, improper sequencing, no ground force transfer. All of the things that really become important as they get older are not there.
I agree with you. 32 years ago, I started teaching baseball player development, and it was very new. And the most important thing I knew growing up was how to play catch. So the first thing I thought, as being a 22-year-old professional player that was going out teaching clinics and teaching adults how to teach kids how to play, was most important thing is how to catch and throw. And over the years, as I've gone through these past 32 years and I've watched the evolution of baseball player development, early, those 32 years ago, people were teaching throwing and catching. Now it's less. It's all about, these measurable numbers, just the number. But who's teaching how to take the ball out of your glove and have your thumb down, and you start to get the separation and, thumb to thigh, fingers to the sky? No one's teaching that anymore. They're just saying, throw hard.
Yeah.
Get the ball here, get in this position, and just do that. But what about getting into the proper position first, and the releasing of the ball, and the follow through, and how to use your body to get the most out of your throw? That's not being taught. You wouldn't believe how many kids cannot move their feet properly, whether it's a shuffle, a crow hop, or any type of momentum to their target. In throwing, and we're not just talking pitching like you were saying, it's just throwing in general. Those things are being overlooked. My whole goal as a player development person in teaching the game is teach kids how to catch and throw right from the get-go when they're 5 and 6. Teach them the proper mechanics so when they get to be older, those things are more efficient. And so when you see that athlete that's 15, 16, 17, they know how to catch and throw properly.
I think that's very important in your insight, is definitely shown that there's a lot to be done still at this point. There's a lot of information out there, but is it the right information? Are people using it properly?
And Aaron, by doing that, their velocity is going to improve. You see,
I agree.
Proper throwing mechanics leads to better velocity. So when you get that athlete who's training, that middle school athlete, and you've taught them how to catch and throw, then the transition from Young Guns program, where they've learned how to throw early, and you get them in here and you're training all these components to help their velocity, it's manifested better. It just happens a lot easier than trying to reteach them how to throw.
So moving on to catching, what are your thoughts on that? My own observations, I get athletes in here and they'll train with me, but I'll like to go out and watch them practice. And some of that we share athletes, so some of them are here, and I'll go to a game and watch other athletes. And I just think the aspect of proper glove work, and again, putting your feet in position and how to hold the glove when the ball's coming from a particular trajectory doesn't seem to be taught. And you know what? One thing I've also noticed is that I still see a lot of fear with some of these athletes, especially middle school athletes. When I see those high pop flies, I never liked them either when I was playing. So I get it.
Right.
I know what they're feeling.
Right.
But I was also a kid who was just a neighborhood kid who played baseball. I
Right.
was never taught, so I just got out there and relied on my athleticism to get me through. But with the amount of information and coaching that's out there, I don't really see the proper catching techniques with these athletes. I'll give you a quick story. I had started playing baseball again when I got out of college. I met this guy, and we were playing some semi-pro ball. And when I was younger, I was an outfielder, and I could catch anything when I was an outfielder back then. But fast forward 15 years later, when I hadn't picked up a glove in that long, I started playing again just because I liked the game, and ran into this guy. He said, "Yeah, come on, I'll play. I think you could play, and it'd be fun." So I went out there, and man, it was like I was such a scrub when it came to fly balls, and especially those pop flies. And this one guy, I'll never forget. I was so impressed. This guy in one game in center field caught 3 over-the-shoulder balls on the fly. And I'm like, I'd never seen that before.
Right.
I don't see kids with that ability and being that comfortable with the ball coming to them. And why isn't that taught early on versus later on, if at all? Because I'll even watch some collegiate athletes who don't look that comfortable tracking the ball. And maybe I'm not watching enough baseball, but I thought that was quite impressive.
Well, Aaron, I tell you this, is that when we were growing up, we played 3 flies, you're up.
Yep, exactly.
And you played 3 flies, you're up, and that's how you hit. So, the guy would throw the ball all over the place, so you couldn't hit, right? You couldn't catch the ball. So what did we do? Well, we ran after that ball and tried to catch it because we wanted to hit.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's the difference now, is that kids don't play three flies you're up anymore.
Yeah.
It's so controlled, and they need to play these games because that teaches them how to move their body to make these plays. And I think that's a lost art. Yeah. Now it's all controlled. Okay, you can't do that. Oh, use a softer ball because we don't want them to get hurt.
Right.
We're growing up, it was one ball. It was a hard ball.
Yep.
And from the get-go, from the time you're 6 years old. And, you got hit, and you moved on. And, you cried, and it hurt, but you moved on. And I think these days, everything's so controlled. You have to throw the ball. Hit the ball to the kids. If you're worried about them getting hurt, hit a softer ball then. But hit the ball to them so they have to run. Right. We want to always throw it perfect to them, and we have to have them catch it. No, we don't. I think missing the ball, there's a lesson to be learned. The player learns how to position their glove better, and it's a teaching moment from us also as a coach, is to show the player how to properly do that. Right. And it's not always about the success.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, one of our favorite games when I was growing up was pickle.
Oh yeah.
I
love that.
You'd have 3 or 4 or 5 guys playing pickle, and we'd have to play with older guys, so they were throwing that ball.
Right.
And so if you were one of the ones catching, you had to catch that ball.
Right.
And they don't do that, and that I think those sorts of games instill an amount of creativity and the ability to improvise that later on makes you better athletes.
I can't agree with you enough. I think even playing, pepper.
Yeah.
We played pepper, we played flip, we played pickle, as you mentioned, 3 flies up. Those are games that kids don't play these days. And I think a lot of times those are the games you could play in your backyard.
Yeah.
You didn't have to have a ballpark.
Right.
You play them. In fact, we played them in the street.
We sure did.
We played them in the street, and so you just played these games because they were fun. There was no structure to them, and you had a good time, and that's how you learn how to play and how to catch at a fast rate speed. The speed of the game, that's where kids get off a little bit. Those games, the speed's so quick, you're just being responsive. You're reacting, and I think that's lost a lot with this group of athletes that are 10 to 14 is being responsive and reacting to the situation, where it seems like they have to be told what to do these days instead of being a reactive athlete. And I think that's the element of sports performance. When you start talking about running, throwing, catching, you're talking about sports performance. That's what you're teaching, how to be responsive, how to react. Well, Those are important components in baseball.
Right.
That's their athleticism, and I think that kind of feeds off that.
And I think the games also act as a bridge to performance, because it simulates some of those, those weird situations, weird bounces, or throwing around a person, or tagging someone and it even though it's in a game situation, it provides a little bit of pressure, and it's just a different environment. I think that it allows these athletes to build that skill set and be able to use it more on the field.
There's something you said there that I think is important for the young athlete. You said that pressure, that ability to react in a game situation. You can't teach that in practice.
Yeah.
But playing those games, like you just mentioned, that's where it's learned at. And I think in this day and age, kids need to do that so they learn about the pressure. They know about what their body will do. That's something we can't repeat as coaches, but them playing those little games that we mentioned, it helps them with their development.
And you touched on something earlier that struck a chord with me about, the failure aspect. And practices are so clinical now that the athletes don't feel like they can fail, and the coaches are probably not pushing them because there's this kind of vicious circle of, okay, if the kid keeps failing, he's gonna get discouraged, and that sort of thing. And I think that adds a component that makes it harder to train, because now you're scared to fail, and so now the coaches are maybe making things a little bit easier for you. Whereas in a game, you're out there playing a game with your buddies and neighborhood kids, that aspect isn't there. Yeah, you might get some ribbing, but it's not so, I think, restrictive in terms of the pressure. And I think maybe with the games, kids will learn to handle the pressure a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's an important component of it.
So that'll do it for today's topic: run, throw, catch. The most important skills for middle school athletes and younger.
This is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Aaron Thigpen, the source, signing off.